And thank you very much for your time, County Executive. It's good to see you.
Good to be here with you, Liz.
So I'd like to get started with a discussion about the property tax cap, if you will, and mandate relief. You made some very interesting remarks earlier today. You said that if significant mandate relief is not coming from Albany, it will be the undoing of society as we know it. Those are your words, and they are pretty intense. Could you explain what you mean?
Well, what I mean is this is a typical Albany soundbite. That's how they tend to govern in Albany. And when we talk about a property tax cap, we're talking about it because we're the highest tax state in the nation when you look at the combination of property taxes, sales taxes, and income taxes.
Sure.
And certainly a third more than the median tax state. So the public's very angry about their level of property taxes, but they're all related to mandates out of Albany and associations with the Taylor Law, certainly the Triborough Amendment relative to schools, binding arbitration and fire and police relative to cities. And in the case of the counties, it's Medicaid, Medicaid, Medicaid.
Right.
So it's interesting that Albany is responding to public anger by saying, let's cap the levies at 2% growth per year, regardless of population growth, regardless of the growth in assessed values of real estate, and without any mandate relief. And I say it's the undoing of society as we know it, because just take Erie County, for example. 100% of our county property tax goes to Medicaid, which goes up by law 3% a year. If they cap our levy at 2%, even if we had growth in the assessed value of real estate at 4%, we would be cutting our rate to keep the levy growth at 2%, which would drive a $2.5 million per year compounded annual deficit. And it begs the question, where are we supposed to come up with that extra money when our pensions are skyrocketing and we have the Taylor Law, which pretty much prevents municipalities from negotiating new union contracts? It guarantees bankruptcy.
Okay. Well, now let's stop right there. I have spoken to other elected officials from upstate. I mean, just recently I was talking to Stephanie Miner. She's, of course, the mayor of Syracuse, and she said if there was no mandate relief, she expected that her city would be under state control from a finance board within a year or maybe two. Buffalo already is. Erie County has already had this experience. So where do you go from there? If you've already gotten to that level and you don't get what you need from Albany, then what happens?
Well, that's why we have to call this out for what it is. We need to call on Albany for the mandate relief, especially in Medicaid and the Taylor Law. And we need to allow municipal governments as well as schools and colleges to fix their own problems. Today, Erie Community College announced a 9.1% tuition increase based on the cut in state aid that just occurred. So Albany is simply cost-shifting their problems on the local municipalities, and they're really just issuing a soundbite. And I've asked the rhetorical question, why is it that they're talking about a property tax cap when they don't levy property taxes? Why aren't they talking about an income tax cap, since in fact Albany does levy income taxes? And I've yet to get a response to that question.
You know, County Executive, I find this kind of fascinating because, you know, Governor Cuomo, of course, and the legislature just passed a budget, and the governor says that it's actually changing the way business has been done in Albany. He says that he's making Albany work the way that it is supposed to and has not been for years, of course, the most dysfunctional government in the nation. I mean, you wanted to run for governor at one point. It sounds to me like you're challenging his view of the way things are working. Are you saying that what he has done up until this point has not been successful?
Well, I'm saying right to now, all we've seen is status quo government. They had a big celebration because they passed a budget on time that all the rest of us that are involved in government do routinely because that's what our job is. There was no Medicaid reform, no change in the Taylor Law, no change in the pension program, no reduction in our workforce. You know, I'd like to say nothing like we've seen in Wisconsin, Indiana, and New Jersey. And I believe we've missed an opportunity to start driving down a new road. What this budget has done is guaranteed that New York State will remain the highest taxed, most regulated state in the nation, and that as we do that, we're going to continue to have a loss of jobs. We're going to continue to have to buy the jobs we get. Just yesterday, we announced that major incentives to First Niagara, and I'm glad they're bringing the jobs here. But in effect, we had to buy those jobs.
Okay, but
let's think back to Yahoo when we had to give them $80 million for 100 jobs.
Okay, hold on.
It's a sign of desperation.
Before we go, a sign of desperation, interesting. Before we go any further, then let me just ask you this. Are you still interested in running for governor, perhaps in 2014?
No, Liz, I am very content and quite happy, actually, being the county executive. We've still got work to do. I'm very proud of what we've accomplished in 3.5 years, and that's how I'm going to be running this year. I'm more interested in pointing out the kinds of tough decisions we've made in Erie County and the success it's brought, and frankly, challenging Albany to accept some of the same reforms we have, give us and all the other counties and cities mandate relief, so we won't be the highest tax state in the nation. And we need a vision of success, not a vision that continues to keep us in last place. And so for those reasons, I want to speak out on these issues. But no, I'm, at this point, very, very content to be county executive.
Okay, at this point, you are running for re-election, we should note, obviously, this year. And then I would assume you wouldn't rule anything out or in. I mean, it's 2014 is a long way away.
Yeah, right now I have one singular focus. I believe my opponent, expected opponent, is announcing on Saturday, and so you don't ever take anything for granted. All you have to do is ask Tom Suozzi that, and so we're taking this seriously, and we're going to run on a record of accomplishments the last 3.5 years.
All right, some of your fellow Republicans, and we should say that your expected opponent is the Erie County Comptroller, Mark Poloncarz. I believe he's the Democrat who's expected to run. Some of your fellow Republicans all over the state actually have been likening Andrew Cuomo to Chris Christie, who's of course the Republican governor in New Jersey, have been saying he's acting like a Republican, have been embracing him. I mean, you seem not to agree with any of that. Do you believe that he actually should have been, you mentioned Scott Walker from Wisconsin, that he actually should have gone a lot further, and we haven't seen, we should note actually, the contract negotiations are still going on. It's possible there will be 9,800 layoffs if there are no concessions. The mandate relief team is still out there, so we don't know yet. Of course, the session isn't over, but do you believe that he is not, in fact, acting more like a Republican than like a Democrat?
Oh, absolutely not. He's still spending like a Democrat, and I don't mean that in a derogatory term. I'm just saying he is continuing to spend. While he has stopped the growth in spending, he's simply pushed those mandates down on the colleges and the schools especially, and today we had a 9.1% announced tuition increase at Erie Community Colleges. We're seeing school districts announcing 6%, 7%, and 8% increases. It was traditional Albany cost shifting. There's no reform. And when you talk about running government like a business, if we can do without 9,800 state workers, we should lay off 9,800 state workers. It shouldn't be tied to union concessions. We should have both. We should have layoffs. And when you look at Erie County, Liz, by the end of this year, I will have cut the Erie County workforce 20%. That would be the equivalent of 40,000 jobs in the state government. And so since I've done it in Erie County using Lean Six Sigma, I can promise you that magnitude of reduction would not be difficult in the state of New York. But on top of that, we also need the union concessions we're seeing out of Wisconsin, Indiana, and New Jersey. So clearly, I would suggest that, no, Governor Cuomo has not gone anywhere near far enough. And in fact, to the best of my knowledge, I don't know anything that he's done to reform or change business as usual other than pass a budget on time, which, again, the rest of us do every year.
Okay, let's switch briefly before we run out of time to that special election, which is right around the corner, May 24th. It's the congressional election. You're backing Assemblywoman Jane Corwin. That Siena poll just recently came out last week. There are only 5 percentage points between Assemblywoman Corwin and her Democratic challenger, Kathy Hochul. Were you surprised by that? I mean, Jane Corwin came in as the front runner. I know you still believe that she's going to be able to pull it off, but that seems a little too close for comfort.
Well, it's a tight race, Liz, because you have 2 Democrats running against Assemblywoman Corwin. They're both spending millions and millions of dollars. And Jack Davis, who's the third-party candidate, has run for this seat 3 times as a Democrat. So what you have is really a battle of dollars on television, and you would expect each candidate is portraying themselves in the best possible light, attacking their opponents in the worst possible light. So I really think you would expect just what we're seeing here, which is a very tight race. And I do think it's going to settle out over the next 3 weeks as people start to really look at the candidates. And you've got a very big difference here with Kathy Hochul having a career of increased spending and taxes, a career politician just endorsed by Emily's List. You've got Jane Corwin, who's...
I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you. I'm just confused, and unfortunately we're running out of time. But my understanding was that Jane Corwin had lent her campaign $1 million. Jack Davis, now a Republican, although he used to be a Democrat, had lent his campaign $1 million, and that it was Kathy Hochul, who is not self-funding. So where is the $1 million that you're saying that she's spending? Where is that coming from?
She's raised a substantial amount of money, and from what I've heard, is willing to put some of her own money in as well. So I'm saying when the dust settles, each of these candidates will have spent $1 million or more on television. And so it's not so much where the money's coming from, it's just how much they are spending.
I see.
But again, I wanted to finish by just saying, you know, Jane's background as a private sector person, less spending, supporting Paul Ryan's spending reductions, endorsed by the NRA. You couldn't have a bigger contrast than Kathy Hochul and Jane Corwin. And I do think in the next 3 weeks that contrast will play to Jane Corwin's advantage, and she will win, and with a comfortable margin.
Okay, well, we shall see. Of course, that election is right around the corner. I'm sorry to cut you off there, County Executive Chris Collins. It's great to see you. We hopefully will be catching up with
anytime,
you
Liz.
in the future. Be well.
Okay, you too. Bye now. Again.
Thanks, County
What I was able to.
County Exec, can you hear me?